Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Disney Reel to Reel, a deep, deep, deep delve into the Disney animated canon. I'm Wyatt, and for 2025, my New Year's resolution for this show will be to produce more solo content. Some of my listeners will appreciate the more focused analysis and shorter run times. Others may miss the witty banter and tangents of yore. But this is all in an effort to sort of clean up my voice within the realm of Disney studies and make a greater distinction between critical analysis and just general criticism. Because we're not here to nitpick, you see. But, with all that said, let's begin sequence 3B of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Where we last left off, the young Princess Snow White had just been ordered to flee into the woods by her stepmother's faithful huntsman. Frightened and alone, she ran and ran until she couldn't no more and collapsed to the forest floor in tears. Now, sunlight begins to pour through the trees, and these peering eyes that had overwhelmed the poor girl actually belong to woodland animals. This is where Disney's prior experience in short cartoons gently begins to infuse itself within this dramatic story. In the Grimm's Schneewittchen, as in hundreds of thousands of folk and fairy tales, animals hold a metaphorical significance throughout. Disney's, on the other hand, provide entertainment value, personality, and an outlet for Snow White to express her own character. That being said, their anatomy and locomotion does not accurately reflect that of real animals. Eric Larson, who animated them along with Bernard Garbut and James Algar, recalled how the deer were nothing more than sacks of wheat. This type of feedback did not go unnoticed by Walt, as he would go on to hire Donald Graham, a professor from the Chouinard Art Institute, to teach life drawing classes at the studio. In a memo dated the 23rd of December, 1935, Walt wrote to Graham, quote, "The point must be made clear to the men that our study of actual is not so that they may be able to accomplish the actual, but so that they may have a basis upon which to go into the fantastic, the unreal, the imaginative, and to let it have a foundation of fact, in order that it may more richly possess sincerity and contact with the public." Unquote. And now, with piqued curiosity, the animals slowly approach Snow White in the clearing. She picks herself up as a rabbit sniffs her out and freaks! They scurry away, but she soon admonishes herself for being afraid of these harmless creatures. As a gesture of goodwill, she asks what they do when things go wrong, to which the baby bird from earlier and its parents respond with song. And we then flow into composer Frank Churchill's and lyricist Larry Morey's With a Smile and a Song. This is the first of 5 songs whose primary thesis is about finding joy and fulfillment in the modernities of life, whether it be through one's personal outlook, work, or play. Lynn Darrow and Jeremy G. from the Ink and Think Hour podcast go more in depth on this idea.
Yeah, and I think you made a comment that this and Whistle While You Work are kind of the ethos of the movie, where it's like things can be terrible and laborious and scary, but if you bring the right, if you consciously try to act with joy and a determination, then you can persist through these dark things, and you can get through the forest to the bright animal-filled thicket on the other side, and you will survive as long as you keep your spirits up.
Even when life is its worst, even when you're consigned to working in these mines that you don't even know why you're working in them, if you bring joy to that, then there can be joy in your life.
There's meaning in life that you can find so long as you're not afraid of it.
And that for me is really what makes this folk tale interesting, is that it is form matches content here.
Yeah.
Where it is meant to be this thing that is like, let's have some fun.
Yeah, they have a whole song later that's just, the lyrics are something like, "Isn't this a silly song for everyone to sing?" And I feel like that's kind of the tone of a lot of the movie, where it's like everybody can sing this,
yeah.
and in doing so, everybody has this power to persevere.
We can all sing and we can all dance, and again, it feels, I know I keep coming back to this, but it's very folk-like.
In a previous episode, I raised the hypothesis based on storywoman Dorothy Ann Blank's serialized adaptation for Good Housekeeping magazine, which states that the only memory Snow White had of her birth mother was a lullaby she used to sing to her. Now, I like to imagine the lullaby was with a smile and a song, which fits in with her trying to make herself feel better in this stressful situation. But that's just me. Now, this is where I refer back to Victoria Schmidt's Heroine's Journey character arc model. We have 3 steps to address here, and admittedly, the first 2 fit into the last sequence better than this one. My bad. But first, there is the awakening, where the heroine experiences hopelessness and subsequent determination with regard to shedding her old identity in lieu of a new one. For Snow, this involves fleeing from her stepmother and the secure life she thought she was living within the castle. This former life as a scullery maid stifles her growth into adolescence. But as soon as she is acknowledged as a lovely maid by the magic mirror, the queen views her as her next rival. Then there's the descent, where the heroine becomes fearful over the life she has now abandoned. This is visually personified through the glowing eyes and gnarled branches of those haunted trees she imagined in the dark forest. They may represent the queen's wrath, as well as other spectral forces out to do Snow White in. And then finally there's the Eye of the Storm, where the heroine experiences a boon of temporary success and security. This step actually takes up the next 50 minutes of the film, but for now, Snow White remains safe, as long as her stepmother remains ignorant of the huntsman's deception. And with that, we reach the end of the sequence. Now, with this being the second episode where we really get to see Snow White's personality come through, I think we should start crediting the various women and men who make up the fairest one of all. For the purpose of this episode, we begin with her voice. It was very important to Walt early on that Snow White be an adolescent. She had to possess the innocence and optimism of a child and the romantic longing of a young woman. She had to be Shirley Temple.
When they're inside me where it's dark, I walk around like Noah's Ark. I stuff my tummy like a goop when animals crack good in my soup. Oh my goodness.
And Jeanette MacDonald combined. Through the animation process, he found that balance in Hamilton Lusk and Grim Natwick, as well as their assistants, but when it came time to begin casting the role in the spring of 1935, nearly 150 girls auditioned, with Walt listening in through his office speaker. Among them were teenage soprano Deanna Durbin, and Walt's own Alice from back in the 20s, Virginia Davis.
Well, while I was there, he had me audition for Snow White.
For the voice?
For the speaking voice. He tried for the singing, but I'm not a singer. Carry a tune? Oh, yes. But not a singer. Mm-hmm. And he had me audition for the speaking voice, which I can do. Want me to do it?
Sure.
And a shoe! This'll never do. And that's just one part I remember from it, from the audition. And so he thought that was fine. Or I guess what he would say, well, that'll do. That's what his real phrase was. But then I was supposed to do the live action also. And he even went down to Western Costumers with me. and looked at the costume, and I remember him picking up a sleeve, picking it up to see if the sleeves were right. And I was all set to do it. But then, unfortunately, we had the same contract problems that we had when the Alice comedies were over. I would be paid for my live action and voice when recording or photographed. It would be about 3 years in the running. And at that time, I couldn't tell anybody that I was doing it because he kept everything secret. And I couldn't work anyplace else. And that would have been about 3 years out of my life. So again, my mother said no. So I didn't get to do the voice for the live action. I'm sorry I didn't, because I would have enjoyed doing it.
Another one of the first to take a crack at this was 18-year-old soprano Adriana Caselotti. As the daughter of respected singing teacher Guido Caselotti, she had the kind of operatic training Waltz sought after. At the time, her parents had been divorced, though she and her actress mother lived together on Alta Loma Terrace near the Hollywood Bowl. While visiting him at his day job, a talent scout rang him up on the phone, and they were initially unaware that Adriana was listening in on their conversation. Assuming she fit the bill regarding Disney's demands, she seized the opportunity by chiming in with,
"Papa, how about me?" And I went, and I said, "I could talk like a little girl, too." Papa said, "Get off the phone, Adriana." And the man said, "No, let's have her come down here. Who knows, maybe she would work out all right." When I first walked into the studio, Frank Churchill, the musical director, handed me a manuscript of Someday My Prince Will Come. And he said, "Little girl, I'm going to the piano, and I'll play it 3 or 4 times, and then you will try to sing it as best you can, and I'll help you along." Well, he was on his way to the piano, and he didn't know that I could read music. So I'm going, "Someday my prince will come, someday we'll meet again." He said, "Oh my God, the kid reads." He was so sold on me from that minute on that he wouldn't listen to anybody else.
Disney and Churchill were both enthused by Caselotti's performance, but soon acquiesced to hearing out those other 149 girls before reaching a firm decision. She returned a year later and won the role. Disney offered her a contract with a stipulation that she not perform in subsequent films to protect the integrity of Snow White. She accepted, perhaps unknowingly. Quote, "I didn't know what was going on. I was a punk kid, I was very smart, but I wasn't interested in anything except myself, and so I didn't care what was going on. I just went along with it." Unquote. And then the work began. Adriana came into work for 48 days, working 12 to 15 hours, non-union, might I add, and earning $20 per day, adding up to $970, over $20,000 when adjusted for inflation. Recording sessions were overseen by Churchill, Hamilton Lusk, and Larry Morey, with Walt popping in and out regularly. Early on, they deemed her acting capabilities insufficient and hired a dramatic coach to work with her for 5 days. The trouble was they had Adriana recite lines from her diaphragm, which brought out a deeper tone and lessened the little girl sound they were looking for. So they dropped the coach and allowed Adriana to interpret the dialogue on her own. Still, some lines had to be read over 10 to 15 times. You can only imagine how many times she had to say, "Oh, it's adorable!" And then on occasion, they'd bring her father in to assist her vocal performance on a song like "Someday My Prince Will Come." Basically to sound more like a young woman than a little girl. Speaking of orchestras, she performed the majority of her songs a cappella. The sound engineers may well have had something to do with this. To quote Bob Cook, she had a vocal range. It was almost like a shriek, a lot of it, and her sound level was almost completely uncontrolled. Then she'd blast one word or two and then go down to a very weak voice rendition. With an orchestral background, we knew it just wouldn't work. So we would try to get the high points down and the low points up, and she tried to do that in the performance, too. But, of course, if you inflict too much of that on the singer, that hurts the performance, because then they're not trying to sing the song beautifully, but they're trying to do a mechanical thing. So it was a great compromise in there. That's what made her difficult. She was in a register that didn't record well in the first place." Unquote. There is a pretty well-known anecdote regarding Walt incentivizing his team to come up with gags for a $5 bonus. It turns out Miss Caselotti herself offered a cadenza for this bonus. Quote, "One day I was on the set and he happened to be there. So I walked over to him and I said, 'If you could get a bird to imitate me, we would do something like,' and I had the exact melody and he used it exactly." And he said, "Hey guys, come over here. Look what the kid's got. She's got an idea. This is the truth. That's used in the movie. And I still want to know where's the $5. I never got paid." Unquote. For a radio broadcast for the film's premiere at the Carthay Circle Theater, she sang the songs that would gain her immortality as Snow White and no one else. Afterwards, she and the prince's voice actor, Harry Stockwell, approached the box office, assuming they could, get in without tickets and no formal invitation from the studio. They were denied, but as soon as the seller looked away for a moment, they snuck inside and found a spot in the side balcony to sit and watch history being made. By 1940, the Snow White record album proved to be one of the most popular albums sold in America. Adriana was aware of this and sued Disney to get a share of the record profits. Unfortunately, the case fell through when Disney lawyer and the source of Walt Disney's paranoia regarding communists, Gunther Lessing, produced a document that proved, quote, "She had signed all her rights in her performance to Disney every time she put her signature to her paycheck," unquote. In the following years, she would find bit parts in films like MGM's The Wizard of Oz and RKO's It's a Wonderful Life, as well as participate in promotional tours for Snow White and other Disney films. In fact, the last time she saw Walt was at the 1946 opening of Song of the South in Atlanta, Georgia. From the balcony of the Summit Hotel, they waved down to parade performers and onlookers before going separate ways again. In 1972, she made her television debut on the Julie Andrews Hour in a salute to Walt Disney. She sang a duet with Miss Andrews, which I watch probably every couple of months, because it's so good. Then, in 1983, she was contacted by Wed Enterprises to re-record the song I'm Wishing for the Snow White Grotto at Disneyland Park.
So I said, well, I'll certainly try, but at that time, I was already 66 years old, and I wondered how I was going to do it, but I said, I will try, and they said, it has to be in the same key because we've already done the orchestration of it. I said, okay. I said, I'll try, and I got out to the studio, and I made the take of I'm Wishing all the way through beautifully. What happened was before there were a few bars of humming, something like for some reason or other, that would not come out the way I sounded in the film. And I did it about 4 times, and each time I did it, I started to lose my self-confidence. And finally, I said, fellows, in the booth in the other, I said, fellows, will you just let me sit here for 1 second and just think for a minute? So I had a little stool there, and I sat there, and I closed my eyes, and what I did was, I said, Walt, if you're anywhere around here, will you please somehow make my notes come out of my mouth the way you think it should be? I'll just sing. And this is what I did, exactly that.
And the one take, everybody's jumping up and down in there. They was just perfect. I didn't tell them how I did it. They would not have believed me. They would have thought I was crazy. But this is how I did that. And it worked out, and there have been other times when I asked Walt to come to my rescue. Believe it or not, I don't feel this man is dead. A man that great cannot die. It's impossible. His spirit will stay with us forever. He's with me much of the time. He really is. And I'm not some kind of a nut about these things. I really am not. I've never even read a book on that sort of thing.
In 1993, Snow White made its final theatrical reissue. Around the same time, a home video edition began development, and this deleted bedroom fight sequence, which we'll discuss later, was rediscovered in the archives. Adriana was called in to re-record the dialogue, only for the team to quietly replace her with voice actress Mary Kay Bergman. This practice continued during the 65th Academy Awards ceremony, where the animated Snow White appeared on stage to present the Best Achievement in Animated Short Film Award.
Good evening, everyone. When I got my big break 56 years ago, I never thought that someday I'd be standing here. But frankly, it's about time. I'm not getting any younger, you know. On the other hand, I'm not getting any older either.
Studio chairman Jeffrey Katzenberg had approved the decision to modernize Snow White's voice and appearance. I mean, believe me, she is in fact wearing a silver version of Belle from Beauty and the Beast's ball gown. Bergman, who A, lived across the street from Caselotti as a child, and B, actually got inspired to become a voice actor after watching Snow White, deemed this to be, quote, one of the most uncomfortable times in her entire career, unquote. Regardless, fan letters rolled in, complaining about Snow's updates. Katzenberg issued a written apology, and Bergman never took credit for voicing the character while Caselotti was still alive. And then in 1994, the film finally made the jump to the home video market. With this came another attempt from Adriana to collect royalties from their distributed copies of the film. Several lawsuits had been filed by the likes of Eileen Woods, Mary Costa, and Peggy Lee to varying degrees of success. But alas, Adriana failed to get her case off the ground yet again. She was honored as a Disney legend in 1994 and passed away in January of 1997 at the age of 80.
Well, I think what I have enjoyed mostly from all that is that everyone loves Snow White, and I love it so much that I get a big kick out of when I meet anyone. Instead of saying, how do you do, I say, I'm wishing someday my prince will come. Well, you know, they laugh and they enjoy it. I still live that, and I've enjoyed going through life being Snow White.
Now, as someone who grew up listening to her voice for so many years, you could tell me how unpleasant and shrill it is to listen to, and I wouldn't know what you were talking about. For better or worse, Adriana Caselotti is Snow White. As with her design and demeanor, it is so difficult to imagine that character sounding any different than what we've come to know. In fact, I'd argue some of the subsequent replacements sounded worse. Shall we review?
In the meantime, I wrote out a list of ingredients for supper, so Dopey could go into the forest and gather them from our wild garden.
Oh, you must like spending time with me as much as I like spending it with you. Oh, your dress is adorable. And look, it has wings.
She is a princess.
Now, I hope that after hearing all of this, you are thinking, how is this cheerful? How am I supposed to feel better after listening to such a depressing life story? Well, I have no right answer. But what I can say is that in keeping with the themes of the sequence, Adriana Caselotti responded to these unfair conditions with joy and determination. Though she was screwed out of a career, look at the legacy she left behind. Snow White is still talked about, though maybe not in the terms I'd like to hear it be discussed. But the film still echoes within our culture, and Caselotti has a great deal to do with it. The Wizard of Oz wouldn't be the same without Judy Garland. Now Voyager wouldn't be the same without Bette Davis. Mildred Pierce wouldn't be the same without Joan Crawford. And, I'd argue, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs wouldn't be the same without Adriana Caselotti.
I really feel quite happy now. I'm sure I'll get along somehow. Everything's going to be all right. But I do need a place to sleep at night. I can't sleep in the ground like you. Or in a tree, the way you do. And I'm sure no nest could possibly be big enough for me. Maybe you know where I can stay. In the woods somewhere? You do? Will you take me there?
Thank you all for listening to this episode of Disney Reel to Reel. I'm trying out this new format, and I think it'll be good to upload more episodes in this vein going forward. Guests will still be on every now and then, but this is a new year after all, and I'm ready for growth. You can find the show at DisReelToReel Podcast on Instagram. Any emails can be sent to DisneyReelToReel@gmail.com. And until next time, please don't lose hope. We'll make it through these trying times as best we can, and as we have before. I just know it. But have a magical day, everybody.